Joe Biden finally breaking his silence and denying that he ever sexually assaulted his former Senate aide, Tara Reade.
It is not true. I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened. And it didn't. It never happened. I'm not going to question her motive. I'm not going to get into that at all. I don't know why she's saying this. I don't know why after 27 years, all of a sudden this gets raised. I don't understand it. But I'm not going to go in and question her motive. I'm not going to attack her. She has a right to say whatever she wants to say. But I have a right to say, look at the facts, check it out, find out whether any of what she says is asserted or true.
Biden also under pressure to release Senate records his accuser says could show that she filed a complaint back in 1993. The former VP says he's confident a complaint doesn't exist in the National Archives or at the University of Delaware where his Senate records are being held.
I am absolutely positive that no one that I'm aware of ever has been made aware of any complaint, a formal complaint made by or a complaint by Tara Reade against me at the time this allegedly happened 27 years ago. A record like this can only be one place. It would not be at the University of Delaware. My archives do not contain personal files. My archives contain documents, and when I say personal, personnel files. They don't contain any personnel files.
And President Trump weighing in on the Biden allegation.
I would just say to Joe Biden, just go out and fight it. It's one of those things. But I'd say she's far more convincing than Blasey Ford or the other three that I believe have already recanted.
Dana, I just wanted to start with you and say, do you think that Joe Biden did a good job?
I think he probably did better than his team was thinking, but, they had 5 weeks to prepare. I think waiting for the media frenzy to get to such a high-fevered pitch that you even had, the New York Times shaming them into not actually taking it on and doing an interview. I thought Mika Brzezinski at MSNBC had tough questions for him. I don't think anybody can say that was a super easy interview for him. He opened himself up for some skepticism, though, on this point about the documents. The National Archives saying, no, actually, we don't have those. That would be in your personal papers at the University of Delaware. And it is a little surprising to me, again, knowing for 5 weeks that this was coming, that they haven't gone to the university, asked for the full investigation, and been able to either produce or not produce it. So I think that they're vulnerable on a couple of points. And then on the substance of it, of course, vulnerable on the whole points about the hypocrisy. Now, I understand that, politics and hypocrisy go hand in hand. And if you are accused of hypocrisy, of saying one thing about the candidate you support and then something else against an opponent of that candidate, then you can always rationalize that. You can bring it up. But, in this case, the Democrats have walked themselves into this corner. And Tara Reade is said to she should be allowed to come forward. She's allowed to do interviews. She would do all of these things. I don't know exactly what will happen next because they are calling for an investigation of some sort, but I believe that the next battle is going to be about these documents. And let me just say one other thing. Right now, the Democrats are all standing behind Joe Biden. And you haven't heard much from them in the last several weeks. A few of the vice presidential shortlist candidates have been saying that they support him. Nancy Pelosi said Joe Biden is Joe Biden. But if you start to see any high-profile Democrats start to walk away or to show a little bit of daylight between Joe Biden and them, I think that you will see a whole rash then. And at that point, we might be watching some really interesting history unfold as we're 26 weeks away from the presidential election.
Well, Jesse, when President Trump went through this kind of thing, he denied it. So now you have Joe Biden denying one allegation, not a pattern, but one. So do you take him at his word the way that you took President Trump at his word?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take the person at their word, but you also just have to find the facts. And they haven't really investigated this the way they did investigate Blasey Ford. I mean, to Dana's point, if I had 5 weeks to prepare for one interview, boom, home run. I'd give Joe maybe a stand-up double here. I thought his tone was good, Mika was strong, but I don't know if he convinced anybody either way. Voters are just going to have to never know the truth and just factor this into their decision in November. He left himself vulnerable for sure. When Mika asked if he remembered Reid, he dodged. And his obvious Kavanaugh standard about believe all women has evolved. It's now believe all women at first and then investigate them. Now, a lot of people would think investigate and then believe. I'm not really sure what he believes. I just think he knows he needs to say what he needs to say to get out of that question. The records thing really opens up a can of worms. First, if you're going to say there's Senate records of sexual harassment complaints that the public hasn't seen, I mean, we already know they've settled massive amounts of lawsuits and done tons of payouts.
Yeah.
Like, what makes you think we're just going to look at Joe's records? Why not the current senators? I mean, how far back can you go? And then the Delaware thing, we already know his operatives snuck in there and were squirreling away records. They got caught by Business Insider. It's like, remember Sandy Berger? They called him Sandy Burglar, was stuffing documents in his pants after the Clintons missed Al-Qaeda. I could see that happening. But why did Joe Biden say that in his personal records, there are transcripts of conversations he had with Vladimir Putin? Why would he say that? You don't think the president's going to turn up the heat on that and say, Joe, release the transcript. I released my transcript. Mine was perfect. What about yours? So this isn't going away anytime soon.
All right. Hey, Greg, take a listen. Here's Joe Biden talking about Justice Kavanaugh.
If they come forward and say something that they said happened to them, they should start off with the presumption they're telling the truth. Then you have to look at the circumstances and the facts. And the facts in this case do not exist. They never happened. And there's so many inconsistencies in what has been said in this case. What I said during the Kavanaugh hearings was that she had a right to be heard. And the fact that she came forward, the presumption would be she's telling the truth unless it's proved she wasn't telling the truth.
So, Greg, does this give the Democrats cover, holding to that standard that people now have heard from Tara Reid? People have vetted Tara Reid, and now Joe Biden has spoken on Tara Reid.
Yeah, and I'm going to take Biden at his word. I presume that she's telling the truth, because that's exactly what he said. They haven't disproven it. They haven't disproven it. So we have to presume she's telling the truth. Look, Biden was doing great in that interview until he confessed. You know, first he had the total denial. I thought that was pretty good. The denial was pretty strong. And then he says, as a complaint, you know, I don't know why all of a sudden, 27 years, this gets raised. What is this? What is this? That's interesting. I would pursue that. They also didn't bring up a lot of the corroborating, very tough word to say, corroborating evidence. Like, what about the phone call into Larry King? I thought that was interesting. That was interesting. That was around the 90s. I think what's fun is watching the pro-Biden response, which is almost word for word what their side would have mocked when presented in defense of Kavanaugh. So they're apoplectic over a single segment interview of their candidate. The Kavanaugh thing, why you can't compare it, went for days. He was grilled by teams of salivating lawyers. And Mika ruffles their feathers with one segment. Shut up, you're a bunch of hypocrites. Again, the argument will always be about consistency. Everybody's brought it up. But if you said believe all women, then you got to destroy Joe Biden. So theoretically, Joe Biden has to take Joe Biden out unless he says, hey, this whole believe all woman thing, it only suits us politically. So I'm actually not a sexual harasser. I'm just a shameless hypocrite that will ruin you politically given the opportunity. Lastly, I've noticed an epidemic of people getting hoisted by their own petard. Petard's a box that holds a bomb.
Love that.
Number one, de Blasio gets busted for violating rules that he enforced and wanted people to narc on others. Number two, you saw the dudes that tried to frame Michael Flynn, framing themselves. And now you got a guy who was right up there, Me Too and Kavanaugh, getting Me Too'd himself by himself. So I find this epidemic to be extremely interesting. Look, spider doing push-ups.
All right.
Is that fun?
Yeah.
It's Friday. It's Friday.
Katie
Have fun,
Pavlik.
everybody. Come on.
Katie, the vice president has said that a woman will be his vice presidential choice. He's named a panel this week.
Yeah.
So what happened today, the denial, the whole episode, is that going to impact who the choice is? I think, right now you've got Senator Harris, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warren, and former House Rep Stacey Abrams from Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I think the news that came out of this interview today is not that he denied it, because that was obvious. What is he supposed to say? Yeah, I did it. Let's move on. Of course that he was going to do that. The news is that he was finally asked about it, and the president had been asked about it multiple times before Joe Biden was asked about it. So that's the first thing, and I would hope that the media doesn't just let it go, because there has been one interview about his response to it. But to your question about the vice presidential candidate, a lot of these women who are on the short list, apparently, for this position were worse than Joe Biden when it came to what they said about Brett Kavanaugh and due process. And I thought that the Trump campaign today, what they said in their statement about the Vice President Joe Biden's record on this issue, especially when it comes to college campuses, of young men all over the country, and the standard that the Obama administration applied to sexual accusations on campus, Joe Biden would have been expelled and kicked out of campus by now. And so I think that if you take the statements that his vice presidential candidates made as women and apply it to the record of Vice President Joe Biden, people are going to look at this and say there's an injustice here. On one side, women who have valid claims are usually dismissed and ignored, or men are falsely accused. And in the political arena, both of those things are bad. So I think people just feel bad about it and they want to move on.
Katie, does that mean you think this has been a setback for the #MeToo movement?
I think completely, because it shows the Me Too movement, which we pointed out from the beginning, was political. It wasn't about all women. It was about promoting Democratic women who were able to get Democrats more power in positions that they found interesting.